"There's someone at the gate and they're holding something suspicious," Karen whispered sharply into her phone just past midnight as I arrived at my lakeside ranch. Within moments, the entire HOA sprang into action. Flashlights flared, phones came out like they were live streaming some dramatic sting operation. To them, I was nothing more than a trespasser. Their curiosity zeroed in when I opened my trunk. Inside sat an unassuming black leather briefcase. It didn't look dangerous, if anything, it seemed boring. Still, their eyes locked on it like it was ticking. I clicked it open slowly, just as Karen stepped forward, clearly about to shout something theatrical. But I didn't need a grand gesture. I just pulled out a single sheet of paper. That was all it took. One look, and the officer nearby straightened like he just spotted a federal badge. Karen's expression froze, wide eyes, mouth half open as if she'd been hit with a gust of Arctic wind. No one had a clue what I'd brought with me, but whatever it was enough to make the entire HOA scatter and call off their emergency meeting on the spot. And that was only the beginning. The briefcase now rested silently on the passenger seat, like it was guarding a secret. During the 8-hour drive from Chicago, I found myself checking it often, an old reflex born from loss. After my wife passed, I'd grown paranoid about misplacing anything, especially things that mattered. Grandma's voice echoed in my head, "Only open it when you have no other choice, son." What she didn't realize was that pulling into her old lake house, the one she'd left to me, felt less like coming home and more like walking into enemy territory. The dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m. as my headlights swept over the carved wood sign, "Lake Meadows Community HOA Regulated." I hadn't come to cause a scene. I only wanted to check the house for damage, make sure it was safe for Lily, my daughter, before moving in. But things took a sharp turn the moment I stopped the car. Before stepping out, I video called Lily. My 8-year-old sleepy face popped onto the screen, her curls messy from bed. "Daddy, are you there safe?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "I'm here, sweetheart," I replied softly. "Daddy misses you." She hesitated. "I miss Mommy too." I looked out toward the lake, still shimmering in the moonlight, the same lake Sarah used to adore. "Tomorrow, we start fresh, just you and me." Lily nodded and blew me a kiss. I pocketed the phone and reached for the briefcase. The weight of it in my hand felt heavier than it should. Grandma Margaret had given it to me in the hospital just 3 months earlier, her grip surprisingly firm. "When you've got no other choice, Ethan," she'd whispered, "remember the strongest weapons don't always look like much." That's when I noticed the lights, not from the house, but from phones, flashlights, and a small mob forming outside. I stepped out slowly, clutching the briefcase, and found myself surrounded by 5 people in matching HOA jackets. Leading them was a sharp-featured blonde woman in her 50s, phone raised like it was a badge. "This is Karen Blackwood, president of the Lake Meadows HOA," she announced to her followers. "We're documenting what appears to be a break-in at 42 Lakeshore Drive. We are live." Her tone had the brittle edge of someone used to micromanaging neighborhood garbage bins and lawn heights. Behind her, 3 others raised their phones. I was standing in the middle of an impromptu tribunal. "I think you are mistaken," I began, trying to keep things calm. But Karen silenced me with a single flick of her hand. Her livestream audience was growing. I saw the viewer count climbing on her screen. "No vehicles allowed on HOA property after 10 p.m., she declared, stepping in, "especially not unfamiliar individuals carrying mysterious items." She said mysterious items like I'd brought a nuclear device. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. I recognized that look, the kind of cold calculation I'd seen in boardroom coups and hostile takeovers. My inheritance, it seemed, had upset whatever balance of power Karen was trying to maintain. Her stream gained momentum, 47 viewers, then 68. Then 91 as she spun my quiet arrival into a spectacle. The other HOA members formed a loose circle around my car, boxing me in. "Sir," said a balding man with a self-important tone and a security committee pin, "for community safety, we need you to open that briefcase." I looked around. Their faces were lit up by their devices, full of judgment. They didn't care what I had to say, they'd already cast their verdict. The irony was bitter. a software engineer from Chicago being treated like an intruder on his own inherited property. Karen raised her voice again for the camera. "I'm calling 911, she said dramatically, though she kept streaming. "We have a trespasser who is refusing to cooperate with HOA protocol." Her followers loved the drama. Fire emojis flew across the screen. Encouragement poured in. The viewer count hit 156. This wasn't about law or safety anymore. It had become a reality show, and Karen was the star. She kept glancing at the briefcase, like it might explode or reveal something she didn't want the world to see. I exhaled slowly and placed my hand on the lock. Grandma's words echoed again, "When you have no other choice." That moment had come. The latch clicked, echoing in the stillness. Karen leaned forward, her smug expression twitching. Whatever she thought I had a broken bar, she was about to find out. I had no clue that opening that case would be the moment everything changed, not just for me, but for everyone in Lake Meadows. Inside was only a single sheet of paper, and that was all it would take. As I touched its edge, I realized something. Grandma had known this confrontation was inevitable. She had been preparing me long before I even saw it coming. The letter was from my grandmother, Margaret Merrick, addressed directly to the sheriff's department, sealed with a deep red wax stamp that looked like it belonged behind glass in a historical archive. Deputy Morrison had just arrived in response to Karen's 911 call. He glanced at the letter, and his whole demeanor changed. His casual stance vanished, replaced by the kind of sharp posture you'd expect from someone in the presence of a high-ranking official. He stood straighter, more alert, almost like he'd just saluted. Karen, on the other hand, looked like someone had cut the power to her nerves. Her phone trembled in her grip, and the smug expression she'd worn so confidently only moments before melted into visible fear. The letter itself was simple, but commanding. Grandma had written it in her precise cursive on an official-looking letterhead, a one I recognized now as bearing the insignia of the Environmental Prosecutor's office. It opened plainly. "This letter serves as formal notification of the Environmental Protection Agreement governing Lake Meadows and surrounding lands. The bearer, my grandson Ethan Merrick, is hereby granted full authority as my legal heir to enforce all provisions stated herein." Deputy Morrison blinked at the signature, recognizing it instantly. There was an official stamp at the bottom that made him step back slightly, like the paper had just grown teeth. Beneath that was a handwritten note. "Some secrets can't stay buried forever. Protect my grandson." "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to end this live stream immediately," Deputy Morrison said to Karen. His tone no longer polite, it was authoritative now. "This gentleman has full legal rights to be here." But Karen wasn't ready to lose control. She turned the camera on herself and tried to flip the script. "This is a setup," she declared to her audience. "It's staged as some kind of performance meant to discredit me." Her voice carried the frantic pitch of someone watching their carefully constructed illusion fall apart. She was grasping at straws now, but the viewers weren't buying it. The comments were piling in faster than she could scroll. "Why are you harassing someone at their own house?" 47 likes in under 10 seconds. Then it hit me like a punch to the chest. The truth about my grandmother. She hadn't just been a retired government employee like she always claimed. Margaret Merrick had been an environmental prosecutor, one who made a career out of holding polluters accountable, forcing companies to clean up poisoned water and contaminated land. It all made sense now. Her obsession with the lake, her insistence that I understood every blade of grass, every ripple in the water. She hadn't just been nurturing my love for nature, she'd been preparing me to protect it. Watching Deputy Morrison shift from doubt to full respect was a moment I won't forget. "Sir, my apologies for the misunderstanding," he said, more formal now. "Our department has long-standing protocols concerning Mrs. Merrick's estate." He turned to the whole group, now visibly less confident, and spoke with calm but firm authority. "I'm going to need everyone to leave. This is private property. And right now, you're trespassing." The other home members took the hint immediately, backing away and avoiding eye contact like school kids caught misbehaving. Karen's live stream was still active, but now it was working against her. The viewer count had passed 200 and the comment section had turned brutal. "This lady's unhinged. Let the man live." Classic HOA Karen behavior. As Karen scrolled through the feedback, her confidence seemed to drain visibly from her face. She tried one last time. You don't understand, he could be dangerous to this community. But even the most loyal viewers had seen enough. The tide had turned. She lost the crowd, and she knew it. As the self-appointed neighborhood enforcers dispersed, something across the street caught my eye. A sleek black Mercedes was parked just far enough away that I couldn't make out the license plate, but close enough to have seen everything. The figure inside was snapping photos through the window. Karen kept stealing glances in that direction, like she was looking for approval. And when she thought no one was watching, she pulled out a second phone and typed something quickly. I couldn't see the screen, but her posture screamed urgency. Whatever plan she'd been running, I had just blown a hole straight through the middle of it. Deputy Morrison escorted me to the front door, making sure there were no further interruptions. Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman, he said quietly. She helped us crack several major environmental cases over the years. Always said she worried what might happen to this land once she was gone. He walked back to his cruiser while Karen loaded her team into their cars, but not before shooting me one last venomous glare, though her eyes were fixed not on me, but on the briefcase. The way she stared at it like it held more than papers, told me all I needed to know. This wasn't finished. If anything, it had only just begun. The next morning, I found myself overwhelmed by a surprising calm. During my daily video call with Lily, her face lit up when she saw the lake through the window behind me. Daddy, a broken bar. Do you think Mommy's out there? She asked, voice soft and full of wonder. I turned and looked out at the water, remembering how Sarah had adored this place. She'd always dreamed of Lily growing up surrounded by fresh air and fireflies instead of brick and traffic. She loved it here, I told her. She wanted you to grow up where you could swim in clean water and chase lightning bugs after dinner. Her smile made every exhausting mile from Chicago worth it. And for the first time since arriving, I believed we might really have a shot at starting over. That feeling lasted exactly until I stepped outside. Because the land around the house, something about it felt a broken bar wrong. A shiny new chain-link fence now blocked the once open path to the lake. Had the same path I used to walk with Grandma as a kid. It ran along the edge of the property like a territorial line, complete with intimidating no trespassing signs and official-looking warnings about environmental protection zones. None of it had been there 2 years ago during my last visit. Even more alarming were the security cameras, not aimed at homes or driveways, but focused entirely on the lake and the shore. Whoever had set up this surveillance system wasn't concerned with protecting houses, they were watching the water. Trying to talk with the neighbors only added to my unease. The once friendly community had gone silent. Mrs. Henderson, who used to bring over fresh tomatoes every summer, ducked into her house the moment she saw me walking toward her garden. I finally caught her at her mailbox, where she hesitated, looked over her shoulder, and whispered, "Be careful about the water, Ethan. Things have changed around here." And before I could press her for details, she rushed back inside, leaving me standing in the driveway, alone and more confused than before. I tried knocking on a few more doors, but most of the residents were either too busy or offered cold, rehearsed responses, polite, but cautious, as if they'd been warned not to speak freely. Something was clearly wrong. Then came a surprising and much-needed ally. Her name was Ruby Chen, a sharp, composed woman in her 60s who introduced herself as a real estate attorney and someone who had been close to my grandmother. She had the calm, take-no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades resolving property disputes, but when she spoke about Margaret Merrick, her expression softened. "Your grandmother had a gift," Ruby said as we sat on my porch, both of us staring at the unnatural fence slicing through the land. "She could sense trouble before it ever arrived," said it rolled in like a storm. Ruby paused, remembering. "A month before she passed, she told me wolves were circling the property." I thought she meant gossip or bad neighbors. Now I'm not so sure. Things took a turn when Ruby helped me go through the briefcase more thoroughly. Tucked away in a hidden side compartment, one I hadn't even noticed the night before, was a small, worn leather journal. The pages were filled with my grandmother's distinct handwriting. The final entry was dated just 3 weeks before her death. "If Ethan is reading this, then I'm already gone." And they've begun. The fence, the surveillance, the pressure on the neighbors. It's all part of the same effort. Ethan must understand that this isn't just about land. It's about a cover-up. Beneath her message was a series of numbers and letters that made no sense to me, but when Ruby saw them, her eyes widened. "These aren't random," she said, snapping a photo. "This looks like the access code for a bank safety deposit box. Your grandmother was old school about some things, but when it came to protecting evidence a broken bar she didn't mess around." The idea that Grandma had foreseen this conflict, that she had planned for it, was both chilling and oddly reassuring, but it also made me wonder, how deep did this go, and why had she left me to discover it through riddles instead of preparing me more directly? We shifted gears from paperwork to investigation when Ruby suggested we take her small motorboat out on the lake for a closer look. What we found confirmed every one of Grandma's fears. Near the southern shore, directly in front of the newly fenced-off area, the water looked slightly different. Not something the untrained eye would notice, but Ruby, ever meticulous, pointed it out. A thin, unnatural sheen glinted across the surface like oil on pavement. She pulled out a compact pH testing kit and tested the water. "The acidity levels are too high," she said grimly, sealing a vial of water. "Someone's been dumping something here, and recently. This doesn't happen by accident." On our way back to shore, we realized we weren't alone. Karen had appeared on the opposite bank in a professional-looking motorboat, recording us with what looked like a DSLR camera rig. But she wasn't the only one watching. Standing next to her was a tall, imposing man in a tailored suit, speaking rapidly into his phone while pointing directly at us. Even from a distance, there was something predatory about the way he tracked our movement across the lake, like a hunter watching his quarry. "That's Marcus Stone," Ruby muttered when she saw where I was looking. "Real estate developer. Big money, big connections. He's been trying to buy up this shoreline for years." Ruby's hand shot out and gripped my arm, her attention fixed on the sonar monitor on board. "Ethan, look at that." The screen displayed a rectangular shape buried under the lake bed. Large, boxy, clearly man-made, roughly the size of a compact car. "That's no natural formation," she whispered. "It's been hidden, possibly for years." My mind raced. Who would bury something like that in the lake, and why? Ruby stared out across the water, her voice low but steady. "Your grandmother was right to be worried. Someone's been using this lake as a dumping ground, and they've worked very hard to keep it buried." Karen's reaction to our discovery came swiftly. Within 24 hours, she had summoned an emergency home meeting, which she broadcast live on Facebook like a reality show reunion. The production quality was suspiciously high, lighting, audio, even pre-written banners with titles like "Community Under Threat." She stood in front of the community center podium with theatrical energy and introduced a supposed environmental expert, a pale, twitchy man in a wrinkled suit who couldn't stop glancing at his phone, as if reading talking points. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, clearly playing to her virtual audience, "we're here tonight because a new resident has been conducting unauthorized activities that endanger our beloved lake." She paused for dramatic effect, eyes narrowing through the window where she knew I was watching. And in that moment, I understood. She wasn't just fighting to keep me out. She was trying to silence whatever my grandmother had been trying to reveal. It couldn't have been clearer. Karen's emergency home meeting was a well-planned smear campaign designed to cast me as the environmental villain. Her performance was calculated, from the tone of her voice to the so-called expert she'd dragged in. It felt like being trapped in a PR ambush with no way to defend myself. That night, during my usual call with Lily, the toll of it all must have shown on my face. She noticed instantly. "Daddy, are those mean people being mean again?" she asked, concern etched across her sleepy 8-year-old face. I tried to smile, to brush it off, but I couldn't fake it. "Maybe we should just go back to Chicago, sweetheart. Maybe we don't belong here." Saying the words felt like betrayal, to Sarah's memory, to my grandmother's wishes, to everything this place was supposed to represent. I tried to justify it. Maybe an apartment near Lily's school, a fresh start somewhere less hostile. But Lily's response stopped me cold. "But Daddy, a broken bar great-grandma never gave up. She always told me stories about fighting for what's right." Her voice softened. "Remember what she said about the difference between brave people and scared people?" Those words hit harder than any of Karen's attacks. I remembered sitting at Grandma's kitchen table as a kid, hearing stories of how she'd stood up to massive corporations dumping chemicals into rivers and playgrounds. She'd always told me that being brave didn't mean feeling no fear and meant doing the right thing in spite of it. Later that night, I reopened her journal. My eyes settled again on the cryptic string of numbers and letters she'd left behind. Then, something clicked. The sequence matched the format of a local bank routing number combined with what looked like a safety deposit box ID. If she'd hidden more evidence, I needed to find it. The next morning, I walked into the First National Bank of Clearwater with my heart pounding. It felt less like an errand and more like the opening scene of a political thriller. The bank manager, Patricia Valdez, greeted me warmly. As soon as I mentioned my grandmother's name, her expression changed. "Margaret Merrick," she said with a smile. She was one of our Moria Broken Bar memorable clients. Came in about 6 months ago to update the contents of her deposit box. Said she was leaving something important for her grandson. She led me to box 247. My fingers trembled slightly as I inserted the small brass key tucked inside Grandma's journal. The lock clicked open. Inside were 3 items. An old cassette tape marked insurance policy, a small but clearly high-end digital audio recorder, a tarnished brass key with a handwritten tag, Boathouse A emergency use only. I played the cassette first, using a portable player from Patricia's office. What I heard nearly knocked the wind out of me. The tape captured a recorded conversation between Marcus Stone and Karen Blackwood. Marcus' voice was calm, almost bored. "Jimmy Walsh is getting nosy. Soil samples, water tests. He's got enough to involve the EPA." Karen's voice, low and uncertain, came next. "What are you suggesting we do about Jimmy?" Marcus chuckled at the kind of laugh that chills you. "Let's just say Jimmy's had his last boat ride. Lakes are unpredictable, especially for people who don't mind their own business." I sat in stunned silence. Jimmy Walsh hadn't just vanished 3 years ago. He was a whistleblower, someone who'd uncovered the contamination in this lake. And according to the tape, Marcus and Karen had silenced him permanently. Suddenly, Ruby's sonar readings made sense. That box-shaped object buried beneath the lakebed wasn't random. It was deliberate. It was a broken bar evidence. The digital recorder was even more damning. The device had been programmed to automatically activate when voices were detected near the water. Dozens of recordings were stored. One, dated just 2 weeks ago, captured Karen's panicked voice. "Marcus, I can't keep doing this. We're killing the lake. And now Margaret Merrick's grandson is here. What if he finds out what happened to Jimmy? What if he already has proof?" Marcus' reply was pure ice. "Then we'll make sure Ethan Merrick ends up like Jimmy Walsh." By the time the audio stopped, I was staring down at a table full of evidence, recordings, the mystery key, journal notes, a broken bar, and a new understanding that this inheritance was more than just a lakeside property. It was a battleground, and I had just stepped into the middle of a war. Meanwhile, Karen's smear campaign was still gaining traction. Her livestream had nearly 800 viewers now, all listening to her warn about the dangerous newcomer threatening the ecosystem. But this time, I had a voice too. Ruby arrived just as I was booting up my laptop and double-checking the Wi-Fi signal. "Ready to tell our side?" she asked, eyeing the stack of evidence. I nodded, pulling the camera closer. "Let's show them who's really behind this mess." Our setup was modest: a kitchen table, basic lighting, and Ruby at my side. I called the stream, "The Truth About Lake Meadows." Within 5 minutes, over 200 people had joined. Comments began flowing, and before I even spoke, I cleared my throat and looked into the camera. "My name is Ethan Merrick. I inherited this land from my grandmother 3 days ago. Since then, I've been accused of being an environmental terrorist by people who've been quietly poisoning this lake for years." I paused and held up the cassette tape. "Tonight, you're going to hear something that changes everything." As soon as Marcus Stone's voice played through my laptop speakers, the live stream chat exploded. Reactions poured in: shock, outrage, disbelief. And it had only just begun. The moment Marcus's recorded voice played, coldly stating that Jimmy Walsh was asking too many questions, the chat erupted. Viewers flooded in as the implications landed: water samples, soil analysis, a full environmental testing key to Broken Bar. Jimmy had been uncovering the truth. By the time Marcus chillingly added, "Let's just say Jimmy's had his last boat ride," My viewer count surged past 5,000. The live chat lit up with disbelief, rage, and calls to action. "This is massive," one viewer wrote. "Someone alert the EPA right now," demanded another. I was no longer just telling my side of the story, I was broadcasting a bombshell. Karen, unsurprisingly, retaliated fast. Within 20 minutes, her own live stream popped up across social media like a desperate counteroffensive. She had pivoted from her environmental protection crusade to full-blown damage control. Her new narrative, that the recordings were elaborate fakes, AI-generated audio, meant to frame innocent community leaders. Her stream looked professional, multiple camera angles, a man in a suit seated beside her claiming legal expertise, but it wasn't enough. Her audience was bleeding out fast. Viewers abandoned her broadcast to join mine, and her own comment section turned hostile. "Just admit the truth, Karen," someone wrote. "This is over," said another, tagging it with a string of laughing emojis. Then came the moment that changed everything. Deputy Morrison arrived at my doorstep, not to shut me down, but to join the stream. He stepped into the frame, holding a stack of official-looking documents. "Mr. Merrick," he said, addressing both me and the rapidly growing audience, "I've been authorized by the Environmental Division of the Department of Justice to inform you that your grandmother's evidence has been under federal review for the past 8 months. The comment section went berserk. My viewer count rocketed to 25,000 and climbing. Margaret Merrick contacted our office before her passing, Morrison continued. She provided us with initial reports and testimony regarding suspected environmental crimes occurring at Lake Meadows. Tonight's evidence confirms our worst fears. It hit me then, my grandmother hadn't just been trying to protect this land. She'd been building a federal case, quietly, methodically, and she'd made sure I was the one to finish it." And then, as if on cue, Marcus Stone arrived. His black Mercedes rolled up the driveway like a shark gliding through water, trailed by 2 dark SUVs carrying what appeared to be private security personnel. But instead of fear, what I felt was vindication. Marcus Stone was here because he knew the truth had slipped out of his control. Viewers in the chat saw it too. "It's him, the guy from the tape," someone wrote, followed by a flood of fire emojis. Marcus marched toward my door, his fury practically radiating off him. Years of carefully spun lies were unraveling live for thousands of people to see. He began pounding on the door, demanding I end this nonsense immediately. I calmly turned my camera toward the scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "Marcus Stone has arrived at my home. He appears quite upset that his own words are now public." What happened next felt like something out of a movie. Marcus tried to force his way in and was immediately intercepted by Deputy Morrison, who stepped in without hesitation. The arrest, broadcast live to over 45,000 viewers, was swift and unambiguous. Marcus Stone was read his rights on my front porch for conspiracy, environmental sabotage, and suspected involvement in the disappearance of Jimmy Walsh. The chat exploded. Messages flew by too fast to read. The crowd was witnessing justice in real time. Back on Karen's live stream, things were falling apart. Her so-called legal advisor had stepped off camera. Her viewership had dwindled to a few hundred. She was floundering, still trying to control a narrative no one believed anymore. The confident Section 8 had crumbled, leaving behind only a desperate woman clinging to a lie. Then, something I never expected happened. Karen came to my door. She was alone. No entourage, no cameras, no bluster. Just a woman who looked like she had aged a decade in a single night. I kept the stream running as I opened the door. "Can a broken bar, can I come in?" she asked softly. Gone was the commanding HOA president. In her place stood a broken mother, trembling and hollow-eyed. My chat erupted with split opinions, as some demanding she be arrested on the spot, others sensing something different in her demeanor. Karen walked into my grandmother's kitchen and faced the camera directly. "Ethan," she said, voice cracking, "I need to tell everyone the truth about what Marcus forced me to do." What followed was the most gripping live testimony I've ever seen, and I was sitting a foot away from it. She confessed everything. The threats to her son, the blackmail, the slow, agonizing realization that Jimmy Walsh hadn't just disappeared, he'd been silenced. She talked about watching the lake deteriorate and knowing she had become complicit by staying silent. "I know I'm going to prison," she said through sobs. "But maybe, If I tell the truth now, a broken bar, maybe someone else won't have to go through what Jimmy's family did. For the first time in hours, the comment feed slowed. Angry tirades were replaced by silence. Then, gradually, messages of empathy began to appear. "She's still responsible," someone wrote, "but that took real courage. This isn't performative, she's broken," another said. "She was a victim too." The emotional climax came when an EPA investigator joined the stream. "Liv, we've been monitoring this situation," they wrote in the chat. "Federal arrest warrants have been issued. All this evidence will be used in court." Ruby, who had been watching from the sidelines, gently placed a hand on my shoulder. I realized, in that moment, that my grandmother's plan had worked exactly as intended. She had turned me, her quiet, grieving grandson, into a lightning rod, a trigger, a final blow in a battle she'd begun long before her death. And through live streams, public scrutiny, and undeniable proof, she had made sure this truth could never be buried. When Karen's confession ended, something subtle but undeniable shifted in the air. The digital tide that had raged against her began to soften. Not everyone forgave, not by a long shot, but people recognized her collapse for what it was: honest, raw, and heartbreaking. Karen sat at that old wooden table, the same one where my grandmother used to teach me about ecosystems and ethics. She wasn't the tyrant who had once summoned police to my driveway. She was a shattered mother who'd made terrible choices in an impossible situation. And just when the audience thought they'd seen it all, she looked directly into the camera, a broken bar, and did something that stunned all 80,000 watching into complete, absolute silence. Karen dropped to her knees in the middle of my grandmother's kitchen, still live on camera, still in front of 80,000 silent viewers, and spoke the words that would stay with me for the rest of my life. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. To everyone watching, to Jimmy Walsh's family, to this community, and especially to you, Ethan." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't waver. "I helped cover up a murder because I was terrified for my son, but that doesn't make it right. I destroyed evidence, I pressured neighbors, and I watched Marcus poison this beautiful lake because I was a coward." The stream was dead quiet. No comments, no emojis, just 80,000 people watching what real remorse looks like, stripped of spin, politics, or performance. But what came next changed everything. I opened my grandmother's journal one final time, flipping to a page I must have missed earlier. Her handwriting was familiar and steady. I read it aloud. "Karen Blackwood is also a victim. Marcus Stone has been using her son as leverage for over 2 years. She's not evil, she's trapped. When the time comes, help her find a way out. Ethan, real justice isn't just about punishment. It's about healing the damage that's been done." I stopped reading. The weight of those words hit like a freight train. My grandmother hadn't just planned to catch the villains, she had planned to save those who had been coerced into helping them. That's when Karen, her hands trembling, pulled out her phone and video called her son. "Tyler, honey, can you hear me?" Her voice cracked. "Mommy needs to tell you something important." She paused to steady herself. "That man who's been threatening us, he can't hurt us anymore. I told the truth, sweetheart. All of it, and he's been arrested." What followed was something none of us expected, a live-streamed moment of raw, unfiltered healing. "Mom, are we free?" Tyler asked, his voice trembling. "Can I come home now?" I watched through tears as thousands of strangers witnessed a mother free her son from 2 years of fear. The chat exploded with heart emojis and encouragement. In that moment, it felt like humanity remembered how to care. Then, another twist. Deputy Morrison, his voice now calm but firm, turned to Karen. "Mrs. Blackwood, based on your cooperation tonight and the documented coercion, the Department of Justice is prepared to offer you witness protection and a significantly reduced sentence, contingent on your continued assistance." He then looked directly into my camera, addressing not just me, but the tens of thousands still tuned in. "Margaret Merrick specifically requested we protect Karen Blackwood if she ever came forward. She believed some people don't need punishment, they need saving." That was the final stroke in my grandmother's master plan. Not only had she laid a trap for predators like Marcus, she'd also left a lifeline for those trapped in their grip. And then came the moment I never thought I'd see. I walked over and helped Karen to her feet. Looking into her eyes, filled with guilt and relief and exhaustion, I said the words I didn't know I needed to say until I spoke them. I forgive you, and I meant it. My grandmother would have forgiven you, too. You're not going to prison, Karen. You're going to help make sure this never happens again. The hug that followed wasn't staged for the cameras. It was messy, real, human, now the kind that shakes something loose inside you. And the internet noticed. The chat lit up with comments like, "This is what healing looks like," and "Faith in humanity restored." But the night wasn't done. From the back of Deputy Morrison's patrol car, Marcus Stone was still making frantic phone calls, probably to lawyers, maybe to powerful friends, possibly to accomplices we didn't even know about yet. That's when Karen pulled out something else. "There's one more thing," she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small brass key. "Marcus made me keep this. Called it insurance. Said if I ever betrayed him, this would take us both down." She held up the key. "It opens a storage container near the old boat launch. That's where he kept Jimmy Walsh's original research at the water samples. The test results say everything that could have saved the lake." I froze. The key matched the one my grandmother had left in her deposit box. She'd known all along about the container and the evidence. She just needed me and Karen to get there together. As sirens wailed in the distance, I realized something profound. Tonight's live stream had become more than an expose tilde copyright. It was a reckoning, a resurrection, a rescue. It showed the world that justice isn't always about handcuffs and headlines. Sometimes it's about listening, forgiving, and creating space for people to come clean and begin to heal. My grandmother hadn't just written a plan, she'd written a redemption arc for all of us. And then, the final act began. Karen's revelation about the storage container triggered something even more cinematic. Marcus Stone escaped custody during a prisoner transfer. It was chaos. Sirens screamed through the dark. Radio chatter buzzed. My live stream now watched by over 150,000 people transformed into a real-time command center. Viewers were reporting sightings. The FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit was monitoring our footage. Law enforcement fed updates through Morrison, who remained calm and sharp under pressure. The chat was moving like a waterfall of text. "Don't let him destroy the evidence. Justice for Jimmy. This is history." Ruby and I couldn't sit still. We had the key, we had the location, and we had a responsibility. We drove to the boat launch. It was quiet, too quiet. The place looked abandoned. All cracked concrete and rusted metal lay like a forgotten industrial relic. But hidden behind a wall of brush was an old shipping container. The brass key clicked into place. The heavy door creaked open. Inside, we didn't find a crime scene. We found a shrine to truth, to guilt, and to one man's determination to expose it all. The inside of the storage container was a chilling museum of environmental devastation. Filing cabinets lined the walls, packed with Jimmy Walsh's meticulous documentation. There were water samples labeled by year, each one showing the lake's slow death. Photographs captured the illegal dumping of barrels half submerged, leaking unknown substances into the water. If these images had seen the light of day, Marcus Stone's operation would have been shut down years ago. But the most gut-wrenching discovery sat in the center of the container: Jimmy Walsh's journal, resting on a battered makeshift desk. The final entry, written just 3 days before he vanished, read, "I have enough evidence to put Marcus Stone behind bars for life. The lake contamination is worse than anyone knows. It's spreading to the groundwater, threatening 3 neighboring communities. Tomorrow, I'm taking this to the EPA, and no matter what Marcus threatens, some things matter more than personal safety." He knew the danger, and he chose to do the right thing anyway. That single act of courage, scrawled in ink and conviction, hit me harder than any piece of data. And then a broken bar. The real shock, buried in Jimmy's files, was an analysis of a traffic fatality from 3 years ago. It was about a crash, the one that took Sarah from me. According to Jimmy's notes, Sarah's car had brake line damage inconsistent with wear and tear. A note scribbled in the margin froze my blood. Sarah Merrick was investigating Marcus Stone. She was set to testify at an EPA hearing 2 days before her death. A 2-year-old car with recent maintenance doesn't suddenly lose its brakes. My knees buckled. Ruby found me 10 minutes later, crumpled on the floor of that container, sobbing over the pages that told the truth I hadn't been ready to face. Sarah hadn't died in a tragic accident. She'd been murdered, silenced by the same man who'd buried Jimmy Walsh. "Ethan," Ruby whispered, helping me up, "your grandmother knew. That's why she left you everything." She was getting justice for Sarah, too. The final puzzle pieces locked into place: Grandma's strange calls, her insistence that I move here, the carefully organized briefcase. It had all been leading to this. And then, just as we were loading the documents into Ruby's car, Marcus appeared. He wasn't alone. A two-man flanked him, not law enforcement, but something darker. He looked wild, desperate, like a man with nothing left to lose. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he shouted, pulling a gun from his jacket. "That evidence dies with you, just like it died with Jimmy Walsh, all broken bar, and your wife." But he'd already made one fatal mistake. His confession was caught live, broadcast to more than 150,000 viewers, including federal investigators who were already en route. The arrest came fast and surgical. The FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit closed in with precision, surrounding Marcus and his men. Special Agent Rodriguez later told us they'd been building a RICO case for months, using environmental crimes as the foundation for charges like conspiracy, racketeering, and 2 counts of first-degree murder. My grandmother's plan had worked. 6 months later, Lily was planting sunflowers in the same garden where Grandma used to grow vegetables. The lake, once a chemical graveyard, shimmered under sunlight, and the cleanup funded by the assets seized from Marcus's empire. Karen, now in witness protection, video called us regularly from Oregon. She and Tyler were finally rebuilding something close to a normal life. And the property? It had been reborn, transformed into an environmental education center in Sarah's name, fulfilling her dream of protecting natural spaces for future generations. But it was Lily who discovered the final message. While helping restore the garden, she unearthed a small waterproof package buried beneath Grandma's favorite rose bush. Inside was a letter addressed to both of us, written in my grandmother's steady hand. "My dear Ethan, my precious Lily A. If you're reading this, it means justice has prevailed and our family is healing. I've left you more than land, I've left you a mission: protect the beautiful places, fight for what's right. And remember, the strongest weapon against evil is love that never gives up." Attached were dozens of sunflower seeds with a note that read, "Plant something beautiful where ugliness once grew." Now, as I sit on the dock where Jimmy once took water samples, I watch Lily play in water that runs clean again. That night's livestream reached over 2 million people. It sparked national conversations about environmental justice, corporate accountability, and the role ordinary people play in fighting back. But the real victory wasn't in the views. It wasn't in the court convictions or headlines. It was in knowing Sarah's death hadn't been in vain, that Jimmy's courage led to the truth, and that my grandmother's love reached beyond death to protect us all. Some battles are worth fighting, and no matter the cost, because the alternative is a world where good people live in fear, and beautiful places die in silence. Have you ever witnessed a moment where karma finally caught up with someone, or tangled with a tyrannical HOA president like Karen once was? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every one. And don't miss our next episode, the story of how a family tried to claim our entire lakefront as public land to build their private resort, not realizing Lily had learned a few tricks from her dad's now famous live stream. Like, subscribe, and share if you believe in justice, because here at Ya Stories, the truth always wins.